When you talk about the history of the Church of Straid, you're looking at the history of the parish of Clonmany.
Straid Church was originally a Catholic monastery. The actual church building that is there was built in 1772, but the site itself dates from early Christian times, wherein there was a monastery.
The monastic site of Clonmany, folk memory has it, going back to the time of Columkill. Folk memory believes that, in fact, it was founded by Columkill. I don't think it was, alas. But it's a lovely old folk story.
The church itself is St Columba's, so that's the dairy saint, St Columba's.
It certainly was part of the Columban, what we call the Columban Peritia. It was definitely a part of the Columban series of monasteries that sprang from the time of Columba. I have no doubt that it probably was dedicated to St Columba. But no matter, it's a very holy place. It goes back as far as the 4th, the 5th or 6th century. There is a record in one of the government offices in Dublin of a story that was told of how the church, or why the church was sited there. Columkill wanted to site it, I think, over in Killoran, over in Binion, over in Bunahrick. But apparently a small board came and carried the building materials over to Straid, and the board kept doing this for a week or two, and then Columkill realised this is God or whatever telling me that the church must be built in Straid. There must have been very much a lively monastery there. I think it probably contained within it hermits who went out and established little cells all over what we today call the parish of Clonmany. The old monastic site was taken over by the planters, taken over by the Church of Ireland, if you like, as it took over many other old sites in Ireland.
At the time, there would have been a simple church structure there at the time when there was a monastery, and the Protestants took that over, and it wasn't until 1772 that the current stone building that is there was erected. Although the church itself became a Protestant church, in Ireland there was what was called civil law, in that if you wanted your marriage recognised, regardless of your religion, whether you were Episcopalian, Catholic, Church of Ireland, Presbyterian, you had to be married in the established church, which was the Protestant church, the Church of England, or the Church of Ireland, sorry. So, for example, some Catholics still retained their land and property after the Reformation, because they were loyal to the Crown. But if they wanted their marriages recognised, particularly in cases of dowry, that had to be recognised in law. And the only way that a Catholic marriage could be recognised at those times was to be married in the Protestant church. So there were actually many Catholics that were married in that old church down there, even when it became Protestant. Now, it didn't mean they renounced their faith, it just means that they pretended to renounce their faith so that they would be married in the eyes of the law, but they continued to be Catholic. Because the Catholics weren't allowed to practice their faith, they had no church, they had no church ground, no burial ground, the Catholics continued to be buried in Straid Church Cemetery because it was consecrated Catholic ground originally. So they therefore continued to be buried up until the 1840s. So if you can imagine, from the 1600s right up to the 1840s, Catholics in this parish were being buried in a Protestant graveyard. Well, what was considered a Protestant graveyard, even though originally it had its origins as a monastery.
It's the graveyard. That's where the history is. There are people buried on top of people on top of people.
It's what they call a vaulted graveyard. So if you stood at the very, very bottom wall and look up, you'll see all these steps.
And apparently that goes down 30 or 40 feet. There's grave upon grave there. There are people sleeping there who were buried there 1600. At the time the Dome of the Rock was built in Jerusalem, there were people being interred in Clonmany.
A grave in there that is marked 1687, a medieval grave. There was one that was even earlier than that and has been removed by Donegal County Council. Nobody seems to know where it is.
When we say it was a Protestant church, it wasn't exclusive. The church itself was used for Protestant worship, but the area around it, I don't think it was ever claimed exclusively by the Protestant church. And that's why people from all persuasions were buried there and could be buried there. And it wasn't exclusive. It was too old to belong to anyone. I mean, were the monks Catholic? I don't know.
Even though it's now considered to be Church of Ireland, it's obviously has its origins as a monastery. And probably before that as a Druidic site, because it's near water. On the curve of the river just below the site, there is evidence of a ring fort. So an Iron Age ring fort being there, that was pre-Christian. So obviously it had, you know, some sort of Druidic properties prior to that. And a lot of Druidic sites were taken over by the early Christians, and it was a way of integrating the people into into the Christian faith without being too much of a pull from the old ways of the Druids and the paganism and all of that.
So there are probably Druids buried there, there are ancient old monks buried there, there are people of the old Celtic Catholic Church buried there, there's people of the Roman Catholic Church buried there, and there's people of the Anglican persuasion buried there. It's rich in history.
I believe in a shared history regardless of whether someone's Catholic or Protestant. You know, it's a shared history. It's what's made us as a people. I think that you know, when we look back in time, there's always been history written in the eyes of the conquering people. So at one time, the Celts came in here and took over from the people that were there before, and it's like the Romans coming into, you know, Anglo-Saxon Britain. They took over, and each of these peoples brings something, whether you like it or not, brings something with them.
That's what makes it interesting. You know, there's continuity there. There's continuity right up until the present day.
It's a shared history, and I think the very fact that it's representative of a more ancient site, to me, would make it very important in my eyes as a historian.
Well, if you look over the graveyard into that the wall of the graveyard into the graveyard, and see all those graves there, you'll wonder about them, who they are, you know, where did they come from? Were they Christian? Were they Catholic? Were they planter? Were they what were they? It raises an awful lot of questions.
I mean, these are people that shared our blood, people that were there prior to Christian or Christianity being introduced into Ireland. There were pagans, people that, you know, are our ancestors effectively. So then the Christians came in and took that over, and then after that, when it changed from the Catholic to the Protestant faith, there was another change. So again, that's the shared history.
There are lying buried there, planter and Gael, and they're all equal.